All right. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Talk. We're your hosts, Vincent Hannum.
Matt LaSpleen.
Yeah, today we are coming to you on a actually quite gorgeous Saturday afternoon in Minneapolis. It's about 50 degrees out, but the sun is shining, and that's always a good thing here.
Indeed, it's a beautiful late winter / early spring day.
Yes. And today we are talking about a movie I picked called The Amazing Colossal Man from 1957, directed by Burt I. Gordon from American International Pictures. I think that's the first time we've featured that studio on this pod, but they're a good one to talk about.
Indeed. Hopefully it's not the last time, because they certainly have a lot of other monster movies for us to visit in the future.
Very true. And before we jump in, I'll just give a quick rundown of what we will do. We'll go over the synopsis. We'll go over cast, talk about American International Pictures, sort of the background with this film, the release, some aesthetics and the themes explored by the filmmakers, and then what you're all here for, the fun breakdown of the good, the bad, and the downright campy, as Matt and I saw it, and we'll give our final verdicts at the end. So thanks for joining us. Matt,
Yes.
You have some good news to share.
I do. Thank you. So my first novel, Hollow, will be published by Unsolicited Press this summer. June 21st is the release date. Pre-orders are available now, so if you're interested in checking it out, go to unsolicitedpress.com. I won't get too much into the book right now. I'll just call it political horror and say that it maybe ties into some Camp Kaiju stuff just a tiny bit, a little bit. There's some monsters in it. So yeah, that'll be coming out from Unsolicited Press this summer.
That is so cool. I've always wanted to publish a book.
Thank you. It's exciting. Yeah, I mean, it's a long time coming. I finished the first draft maybe like 6 years ago. So
Wow.
It's cool. Yeah, it'll be fun to see how the process goes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I can't wait to order myself a copy. I can do that now, right? And it comes out in June.
Yes, indeed. Pre-orders are available now. And again, unsolicitedpress.com is where to find the pre-orders page.
There you go. All right. So what do you so what's your background with The Amazing Colossal Man?
This is the first time I saw this movie. I have seen Attack of the 50-Foot Woman before, and they're both kind of part of this craze in the 1950s of like either gigantic or like extremely small people / animals / objects, which are often sort of presented through like rear projection and like in-camera effects and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get more into that later, but it's a really fun movie, and like in comparison to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, I feel like The Amazing Colossal Man maybe has a little bit more going for it, but they're definitely like very similar movies in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I had never heard of this movie really until I started this Camp Kaiju project. And this film was actually recommended to me via a YouTube comment for an earlier Attack of the 50-Foot Woman episode. And I got to give a shout out to this fan. His name is David Rafalowitz, and his comment on the 50-Foot Woman video was, have you ever reviewed The Amazing Colossal Man and or War of the Colossal Beast? I enjoyed both, probably more so the former than the latter, only because War had some continuity issues from the first movie. So David, thank you for your comment. I have since checked out both of those films. Today we're featuring the former, but I'll definitely get into its sequel a little bit as well. So that's my personal history with with The Amazing Colossal Man.
Yeah, it's a really fun movie, and I read a little bit, and we'll probably again get into more into this a little bit later, but I read that it was originally supposed to be a comedy, The Amazing Colossal Man, and I feel like it must have undergone some changes, because it does have some campy, like funny moments like that, but for the most part it's actually like I would say surprisingly like committed and serious in the like themes and the story that it presents.
Yeah, definitely not a comedy per se. And that's definitely in the background. I'll get into some of the trivia with that.
Yeah.
But before then, I'll just run through the synopsis real quick, because honestly, the synopsis for this film is pretty basic. So thanks for hanging tight, everybody. Here we go. The movie opens on American soldiers hunkered in a trench somewhere in the desert. The army is detonating the very first plutonium bomb, and these men are present to observe the explosion. Events first go awry when, after the countdown, the bomb fails to explode. So then a great suspense sequence starts when everyone's wondering when it's going to go off, and they can't wait, or they can't leave their trench in the meantime. However, as everyone is waiting, an airplane, like a crop duster, crash lands in the bomb zone. And then one of the soldiers, his name is Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Manning. He is our who will become our amazing colossal man. He throws caution to the wind, running out of the trench to save the pilot. Halfway there, of course, the bomb goes off and showers Glenn with an explosive amount of light and irradiated energy. Spoiler alert, I think we know where this is going. Time goes by. We see Glenn Manning has survived the blast, but is wrapped up in the hospital, suffering third-degree burns over his entire body. The doctors tell his fiancee, Carol, that he won't survive much longer. But wait, the next day, when the doctors undo his bandages, they discover his entire body has miraculously healed. The celebration does not last long, however, when it's realized that Manning has been adversely affected by the plutonium radiation. He is now growing taller at a rate of 10 feet a day. Unsure what to do, the army covertly takes Manning from the hospital. Carol begins searching for him, eventually tracking him down to an old, out-of-the-way research facility. And it's there where Manning continues to grow under the supervision of a team of scientists who are desperately searching for a cure. Carol, meanwhile, is encouraged to stay in order to help Manning feel better, because as he is growing taller, he expresses depression about the accident and really sort of lamenting his position as a freak, quote unquote. And compounding his melancholy is the fact that the only lodging big enough for him is essentially a large circus tent. So he is just like, my life sucks at this moment. Carol does her best, but eventually she and Manning have a falling out. He becomes more aggressive. He threatens an attendant and tells Carol to just leave him alone. She refuses to do so, but even the scientists tell her that it might be for the best, because not only is Manning growing more aggressive as he grows, but his heart is not growing at the same pace as his body. So Manning is also suffering heart pain, chest pain, and he will soon die just from heart failure. So then one morning, the scientists discover a cure, and they're like, we can stop his growth, maybe reverse it with a special serum that they have concocted that they can inject into the bone marrow. So they rush to tell Manning, but of course, at this point, Manning has escaped, and we're still in the desert, presumably Nevada, and Manning is making his way to Las Vegas. And a news report, breaking news reporter tells us this, and Carol and the scientists give chase in a helicopter. And they have created a giant syringe, literally one as big as it would take to inject a serum into the colossal man's bone marrow, who is now 60 feet tall presently. So Manning rampages through Las Vegas. He now cannot speak. He's totally inarticulate. He's suffering chest pains. He's confronted by the scientists who managed to stick him in the foot. He grows enraged and impales them with the syringe. scoops Carol up on his way to the Hoover Dam. It is there that he is bombarded with bazookas until he puts Carol down and falls to his death in the raging waters below. And thus concludes the story of the amazing Colossal Man.
A pretty abrupt conclusion, I would say. Like,
Yes.
he kind of, he dies, he takes Carol with him, and the end. Like, it's actually, I don't think it was meant to be like a bold, ambiguous ending, but it kind of works that way,
Yeah, I know. That's kind of in line with a lot of monster movies from this era and horror films. They have very little denouement. They just kind of end on the death of the beast, whatever it is.
I sort of love that. Yeah. If, the denouement is like usually pretty comforting and like wraps everything up in like a neat, tidy bow. So when you don't get that, it makes for kind of a unique ending, although, unique and yet very common at the same time.
Right. And I think it keeps in line with the running time. So this movie was released as a double bill with another film as just drive-in fare. And that was the structure of these types of drive-in films. They had to be 90 minutes or less because you had to fit 2 movies into like a 3-hour window. Which I find it fascinating that the art had to conform to the realities of the business model.
Yeah, for sure. Like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman is like an hour and 5 minutes. So that's like an especially good example of that. Yeah. And I think, I read that the film that this was paired with on a double bill when it first came out was called Cat Girl.
Yes.
So I know nothing about that movie, but I am intrigued. I want to find out more.
I mean, we've done both the cat peoples. We just gotta every once in a while throw a cat person film into this podcast.
Exactly. That's our forte. Our forte, if you will.
Ew.
Sorry.
Matt's a writer. I don't know if anybody knows that.
That's why I have such terrible puns.
That's right. Hashtag Kaiju are fun. The cast for this film, really kind of a lot of B or C list actors, but the main cast includes Glenn Langan, who plays Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Manning. Kathy Downs plays his fiancee Carol Forrest, and very interesting, an actor named William Hudson plays Dr. Paul Lindstrom, one of the scientists. And you may recognize William Hudson from his role in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, where he plays Nancy's husband, her two-timing son of a gun husband.
Like the most detestable character of all time, pretty much.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun connection between the two.
Definitely.
Matt, did you want to expand upon the production history or anything? I didn't mean to dominate this conversation so far.
No, not at all. I guess well, I'll get to that later in the good portion of our podcast. So I'll hold off what I was going to say a little bit for now, but yeah, for the production backstory, like you mentioned earlier, Vincent, this was released by American International Pictures. It was an uncredited adaptation of a short story called The Nth Man, written by Homer Eon Flint, published in 1928. And American International, a lot of artists got their start there. Roger Corman maybe being one of the best examples, who like they were given sort of like low budget kind of grade Z schlock campy pictures, but of course there was a lot of creativity and like even sometimes some ambition in those movies. So American International catered or specialized in drive-in movies that kind of catered to the teenage audience. They were actually the first company to utilize focus groups. So they would pitch a number of titles and write a script based on the name alone.
I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is a tiny little bit of a tangent, but I just read a really, really great book called Picture by Lillian Ross. And it's actually about the making of not just like a cheesy, I shouldn't say just, but not sort of like a horror sci-fi movie. It's about the making of The Red Badge of Courage by John Huston. and
Oh,
how that the premiere of that film did play to like a teenage audience, and the comment cards were terrible, and it was all like, this is boring. Why do we care about this old book? The producers kind of like took that movie away from John Huston, and it was sort of butchered in the process. So that's an example of how like, focus groups and like teenagers could like lead to like the downfall of a movie. But
yeah.
I think in the case of The Amazing Colossal Man, it leads to like a pretty fun, admittedly campy, sci-fi, kind of monster flick. Monster used very loosely in this
Yeah,
film.
yeah. No, it's interesting. Just to add on to that real quick, that like at face value, the idea of using a focus group of teenagers to shape your movie sounds like a bad idea. But if your company is just simply that, like if that's the entire philosophy behind your business model, I think why not go for it?
Yeah.
And then you can get some really interesting movies, even if they are bad, quote unquote. At least they're just wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a kind of a perfect example of just like the tension between art and commerce in movies. I mean, obviously, I'm kind of stating the obvious here, I guess, but movies are just such a big industry. Like they have so much money behind them. Of course, like profit to a lot of the producers is the most important thing. So of course they want to be sure that they're going to make some money off of ticket sales before they release it.
Mhm.
And of course, the question is, can you inject some originality and some, emotion, creativity into the film? And I think a lot of these movies were able to do that pretty successfully.
Yeah, and this one definitely stands out. I haven't seen hardly any other American International Picture films, uh, but I've heard that The Amazing Colossal Man actually is a standout in their catalog.
Indeed, I've heard that as well. Yeah, and I think I'm could be wrong about this, but I believe they also had a bunch of biker movies, especially in the 1960s.
Yeah, they
Uh,
had biker films. They had a lot of crime films,
mhm.
teenage angsty dramas. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those. Like The Wild Angels is a biker movie that's pretty good.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure Russ Meyer, got a star with American International Pictures. So movies like Faster Pussycat Kill Kill,
Oh, I've
which
heard
is
of
a really,
that.
yeah, really, really great movie. Jack Nicholson got a start in American International Pictures.
Yeah.
He acted in a number of their movies. So yeah, one of those like really admirable low budget kind of off Hollywood studios.
Roger Corman himself, I got into when I started Camp Kaiju. Always a name I'd heard about, but his impact on American film, I don't think can be understated when you look at his proteges.
Mhm.
Uh, Ron Howard, Steven Spielberg. Nah, I don't know about Spielberg, but I'm just like trying to remember.
Yeah,
Like,
Jonathan Demme, I think, got to start with
yep,
American International Pictures. I think even Peter Bogdanovich.
yep.
Yeah,
James Cameron, Martin Scorsese, and these aren't directors who made movies for AIP, but they're directors whose early films were produced by Roger Corman, who cut his teeth at AIP.
quite a legacy. Yeah, huge
Yeah,
impact
yeah,
on American movies for sure.
it's awesome. And Corman is a master at elevating the schlock genre. Uh, yeah, and he was. This is the trivia that he was initially announced to direct The Amazing Colossal Man, but he and his screenwriter wanted to make it more of a comedy, and the producers disagreed and they dropped him from the project.
And hence Bert I. Gordon. I'm very curious what the I stands for, but uh, and again we'll get into this more. But like I think Gordon is able to make some like pretty striking compositions. There's, and I don't want to like oversell it too much. It's not. It's sometimes it's hard to take seriously with like the kind of wooden performances and stilted dialogue and stuff like that. But there's a lot to this movie, and I think Bert I. Gordon does a pretty good job with it.
Did you know he's still alive?
I did not. Wow.
I
He
looked
must
on
be
his
getting up there.
Wikipedia page and there was no date of death. And I was like, oh my God, he's alive and he's 100 years old.
Whoa. Well, I mean, I was gonna say maybe we'll still have another Bert I. Gordon classic awaiting us, but I don't know. That's maybe too much to ask for.
He did direct I Was a Teenage Werewolf
Hmm.
for AIP. Um, that I hear is a classic. And I lied, that he did not direct that one. Let's see. Earth versus the Spider. Yes, directed by Burt I. Gordon from 1958. Earth versus the Spider. Maybe we'll get to that one. Who knows?
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, I think if I remember right, I Was a Teenage Werewolf was featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000 as also The Amazing Colossal Man and its sequel, War of the Colossal Beast. I believe we're both featured on there as well.
Yep, which is part of its legacy. I think that The Amazing Colossal Man, like many drive-in movies from the 50s, found a cult following with MSTK3.
Mhm.
And I love that aspect of like our pop culture resurrecting these movies that honestly should have been forgotten to history, but here we are talking about it.
Yeah, totally. I love Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I have for a long time, ever since I was a kid. But I feel like even, I don't know, by the time I got to maybe like high school and I watched some episodes, I was like, this episode is great, but I think this movie is also better than these guys give it credit for, you know? There's some
Yeah,
like okay stuff that they feature on there.
right. I think I earlier did I say MSTK3?
I believe so, but the 3K, yeah. We
Man,
I
I
don't
don't. Why am I going to try to say something cool if I'm not going to get it right?
know.
Mystery
We know what you
Science
meant.
Theater 3000.
A great show, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
sorry, after
no,
you.
I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other giant person slash small person films that kind of bookend the Amazing Colossal Man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was part of it was kind of inspired by or riding the coattails of the Incredible Shrinking Man from 6 months earlier, 6 months before it was released. Which was very popular, kind of again in like the drive-in circuit. And like we mentioned before, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, that sort of a thing. It Conquered the World, I think, is kind of another example of like giant monsters, attacking the earth in a way.
And
Um,
Burt I. Gordon also directed a movie called The Cyclops for AIP
mm.
that is another giant mad movie.
He definitely had his niche that he specialized
Yeah.
in. And I mean, like, to be honest, I'm not super familiar with a lot of those movies, but like I mentioned before, it is very close to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It was part of the same kind of group of movies that came out around the same time. And Attack of the 50-Foot Woman is fun. It has some pretty striking images towards the end, because we really only see like 10 minutes of the 50-Foot Woman in this movie that's like barely an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of fun. But I think in comparison, and I briefly mentioned this before, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman is very campy, but in my opinion, doesn't have that much else to it. Like, we spend so much time on her sort of like dirty, rotten husband that it's hard to really enjoy like kind of like the campy sci-fi aspects of it, in my opinion. So in
Mm-hmm.
comparison, The Amazing Colossal Man is more stylish, more complex. Again, not to really like oversell it too much, and it just has some like nutso images and scenes that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. So yeah, my preference is
Yeah.
clear between those two movies.
Yeah. I think you're right on. I think the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, I understand, and I understand why it's a cult favorite. Um, I love the last 10 minutes when
Mhm.
she is just kind of walking around. It doesn't live up to the hype of the poster,
Right.
but when she smashes her hand through the that dive bar and like smashes her husband, I thought that was pretty great.
That is great for sure. And some of the shots right around then when she's like walking through the barren desert and like there's this weird glow around her, which is probably a result of the like superimposition, like the kind of double exposure that they did in the camera to create that effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really strange ghostly image in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. And there are similar things in The Amazing Colossal Man as well.
Yep. And I agree with you that the amazing Colossal Man, I think stylish is the right word that you used. 50-foot Woman is a little maybe too bare bones
Mhm.
in its, I don't know, it's cinematography, it's camera work, it's when I reviewed that film earlier, uh I was just so taken aback by the and not in a great way, just more like a the use of what looked like paper mache to create a giant woman's arm.
Yeah, it is not a convincing effect at all, and that's okay. Like it doesn't always have to be convincing, but it's it's especially like ridiculous in that case. Yeah.
So incredibly campy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay. 50-foot Woman will continue to come up in this conversation because I think they just like they'd be a great double bill together if you wanted to watch have a night of giant people movies.
Yeah, and like if you watch both of them back to back, it would barely be more than like 2.5 hours long. So it'd be great.
Oh man, that's so
Not even
crazy.
actually. Yeah.
Um, what about what? Do you want to transition to themes?
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to ask real quick, should we mention Bandits Emporium before we get into that?
Yes, of course. Banditsemporium.com, Camp Kaiju's official t-shirt partner. Banditsemporium.com. They sell great shirts for us with Camp Kaiju logos on them. You can get 10% off your order by using promo code Camp Kaiju, all one word. So go check them out, give them some love. Proceeds of those sales do support Matt and I on Camp Kaiju, so that's super great. You can not only get yourself some cool apparel, but also support the show. And we really do appreciate it. Thank you for hanging out. It makes it all the more worth it for us to laugh and dig a little deeper into these monster movies. So banditsemporium.com, as they say, we sell shirts. How to
Yeah,
do?
fantastic. Great shirts on there. I have one of my own. Hoping to get some more soon, but yeah, I mean, it's, we love talking about this stuff, and that kind of makes it even more fun, like you said, Vincent, to like, have some swag and like extend the conversation a little bit. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what about these themes? Because yes, on its surface, it is bona fide B movie drive-in classic schlock. And ultimately, I do think that that is the case. But being good critical thinkers and artists, there is material there to dig a little deeper into concerning the times in which it was made. And I did find some material to support some really cool arguments. But I wanted to ask what you thought about the themes of this film.
yeah, I think first and foremost is nuclear anxiety, and that's present in so many sci-fi movies from around this era. It's like for so many of these movies about like giant or miniature things, like the explanation is nuclear radiation, basically, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't really go like any further than that into like explaining what's going on,
Yeah.
which is like pretty fascinating. I think like in the midst of the Cold War, when the threat was very imminent, that this could happen, like nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US and other countries throughout the world could happen. I mean, like even in kind of like campy schlock like this, they reflect the era a little bit. Um, and I think, in addition to the threat of nuclear anxiety and the kind of how pervasive that is in this movie, we also have Glenn's flashbacks to the Korean War, which he fought in. And
Yeah.
like surprisingly kind of brutal and violent flashbacks, I would say, and how much that continues to affect him in his mental state. I think there's more
Mm.
commentary about the United States like military presence and kind of like militarized era in the mid 20th century than I
Hmm.
expected before I watched this.
And you bring up the Korean War flashbacks. I mean, maybe perhaps you could read into this film that his growth and his because he really does I mean he's really depressed in this film,
Mhm.
and how much of that can be tied into a post-traumatic stress disorder with his war history, and just the fact that he survived a nuclear explosion. I think that would give anybody PTSD.
Yeah, indeed. I think you're spot on. I think actually, I sort of wish that it would go a little bit more into that, like when he does become the Colossal Man and he talks about his feelings of isolation and how much of a freak he is, to use his word. It really focuses on just like his, like, I'm a freak, I'm in a circus tent, like that he
Yeah.
can't like relate to anybody. I think the movie could go a little bit more into like connecting his like military background into his sense of like moral anguish, I guess you could say. But certainly the parallel is there to read into it if you want to.
Yeah. And his melancholy and his it's all tied to this idea of the loss of his identity. And I'm taking this from a really great film critique from Our Culture, and this essayist has a great article called "Thoughts on Film: The Amazing Colossal Man," and this writer really expands upon the idea of identity loss and how Glenn, he's literally outgrowing his world, his old life, and losing touch with who he once was as he becomes more inarticulate and more aggressive. And Glenn in the movie has a quote. He says to Carol, "Time's lost all perspective. It's been a lifetime since that explosion. Everything that happened before seems another world, another life." And I think that gives the movie some needed poignancy and grounds it in a lot of empathy for a man who's becoming a different thing than what he once was. And on the surface, I guess that's a little frightening, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that dialogue sequence. You're right that's a greater level of melancholy than I expected from this movie. And it's right around the same time, I think it's shortly thereafter, he meets with Carol on sort of like a, kind of like a nice secluded hill. They almost have like sort of a picnic, even though he's like already like 40 feet tall at this point. And there's like a little bit of a flashback. In addition to the Korean War flashback, he thinks back to just kind of one of the last times he was with his wife before he went to the war, and they have this nice kind of like little conversation in the backyard, and she's asking him why does he have to leave, why did you need to enlist, basically. And he's like, oh, it'll be nothing, I'm going to be gone a couple months and then I'll be back. And we see that that's not exactly the case. So it works really well, and I think there's a surprising level of the movie does take seriously like his loneliness after he starts to become the Colossal Man, as well as Carol's sense of estrangement from him. It works. Yeah, it's taken surprisingly seriously.
Yeah, that was a nice relationship between the two, her wanting to help, him saying no, go away. And sort of they're not married, but it is the breakdown of a relationship, of a very caring, loving relationship. And yeah, it added some nice gravitas to the film.
Yeah. And I keep on thinking to myself, like, I don't want to like again oversell it too much, because like then after that there can be like some really like ridiculous scenes, like with like the army doctors who like try to explain what's going on, and they're like, oh, the heart is a single-celled organism. And when I was like, wait a minute, is that true? And that is definitely not true. So like there's some stuff where it can follow up like a surprisingly sincere scene with kind of like the campy stuff that we expect. So it's like it's a little bit of a roller coaster, but that's what makes it so fun, partially.
Yeah, okay, so I want to hurry up and get to our breakdowns, because what you just said I have thoughts about. So moving on from themes, the form and help me out here.
The aesthetic, one of my favorite words.
Aesthetic, man, I need to like do some warm-ups before this podcast. Okay, so yeah, this is a really interesting subject for a film like this. I was taken by the special effects, and I wanted to ask you, because I think you have more of a knowledge about film technique and production. What's your take on the special effects of this film?
I love it. I think a lot of it was done by rear projection and double exposure. So, rear projection when they shoot footage elsewhere and then like project it behind the actors to sort of, give the illusion that they're someplace that they're not, obviously. Like I think every time that we see Glenn kind of walking through the desert and he seems to be like as high as the mountains,
Mm,
that seems to be how they did that, where, they
mm,
would shoot the mountains and then they would shoot him on like a black screen somewhere else and then overlap the images. And then of course we have like some models, like model sets where like, you might have some like a bed or like a desk or a table that's like really just a couple inches, and that
hmm.
kind of like gives the forced illusion that that Glenn is 40 feet tall or however tall he is.
Yeah.
And then so yeah, like a variety of those kind of in camera and practical effects, and I love it. Like we talked about this when we watched King Kong, with the Peter Jackson remake, and how
Hmm.
the CGI is great sometimes but pretty terrible, surprisingly terrible in other instances in that
Yeah.
movie. And just how like I most of the time would take like practical effects, and in the case of King Kong that would be sort of like, like puppets or like man in a rubber suit, that sort of thing. We
Yeah.
talked about that with Return of Godzilla as well, just how
Yeah.
like these kind of like creative effects oftentimes are like more charming and fantastic than CGI, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's really interesting because Colossal Man, obviously shoestring budget compared to something like Godzilla from 1954, or King Kong. See, King Kong in 33 was stop motion. Godzilla in 54 was rubber suit.
Mm.
Colossal Man is the actor just working with rear projection and miniature props. Three very different techniques that work for their respective films. If Glenn Manning in The Colossal Man was stop motion, it would look like an episode of Gumby. It would be weird, I feel like,
Yeah,
because he's a human.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would not work, I don't think. And yeah, like I wouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily say that the effects are convincing in this case, but they do look bizarre and worldly. Now I can't say that, sorry.
Yeah.
But like that's the style that they're going for, I think, and it works pretty well.
Yeah. And I think it has aged mostly well. I mean, it's the same thing with 50-foot woman. It uses the same techniques. There's in the film itself, they don't always appear on the screen. Like sometimes you could see through the image
Mhm.
of the actor.
Right.
And what is that? Do you know what that is? Why that happens?
I would assume that it's the double exposure where you basically have like two images laid on top of each other. So
Hmm.
like if you're shooting like a shot of like some mountains in the distance and you have the sky, let's say in the upper right corner, and
Hmm.
then on like a different set but on the same strip of celluloid you're shooting a scene where the Glenn character is like walking in that area, you're simultaneously seeing like both the sky and Glenn. So I think that's why it's kind of like that
Okay.
invisible effect in a way. um
Gotcha.
but that I think is a perfect example of like why, yeah, it's not convincing, but it looks so unique and like so ghostly and haunting. Like I think it works even if I'm not totally buying that this is actually happening.
Yeah, yeah. It in a weird way, it doesn't age poorly
Right.
the way certainly a costume would, I feel
Yeah,
like. Yeah,
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's good, but flawed, but you like it anyways.
Yeah, and I would, again, I would take those flaws over like even like pristine CGI most of the time, because usually
Yeah.
when I watch CGI, I'm like, all right, I know, computer animators worked on this for months or whatever, and like
Hmm.
even, like sometimes it looks great, of course, but even then, always in the back of my mind, it's like, all right, I know this is computers, like it's not,
Hmm.
I don't buy it. So like I would rather have something that's like looks weird and is not totally convincing than looks like
Yeah,
overly pristine.
it definitely looks weird. Um, okay, yeah, we got to get into our breakdowns here. What are some good things I had here? Uh, okay, I see what you did. Okay, I like the suspense at the top with the bomb, like the classic ticking, ticking time. Oh my god, the clock, a ticking clock. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
That effect of like we have baked in suspense already from the get-go. Yeah, that was pretty good. Glenn's flashbacks add a humanizing touch, and I love the name, the title of the film itself, and the marketing images. It definitely makes me want to watch this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the backdrop behind you right now indicates, like, yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That's kind of what we're looking for when we watch like a kind of an old-fashioned sci-fi movie, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, totally. I really liked the sort of the very low budget aesthetic, bare bones, as you called it before. I think works really well. And actually, one of my favorite sections of the film is when Carol is trying to find her fiance. I said that they were married before, but you're correct. They're just engaged at this point. But she's trying to hunt him down, and she goes to this, as you mentioned, like top secret army facility. And the scenes where she's like kind of sneaking around these dark hallways, and there's like the set design is just like nothing at all, basically. Like it's just like a blank wall. I kind of love it. Like it works as sort of just like a paranoid spy thriller for at least like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, you know?
Yes, and I liked that she has this agency, and in the army, classic like American government is like, nope, there's no top secret giant man in this facility, and she's like, I don't know about that, but I need to find my husband, and something. So that added some nice drama.
Yeah, totally. I thought that worked really well. Looked pretty cool and minimalist and spare. And yeah, as we mentioned before, like the surprising thematic context of nuclear anxiety and the war is another one of my favorite things about the movie.
Yeah. That's all I had. I have a lot more things to kind of pull apart a little bit with love, but what do you think? Do you have anything else that you like?
Yeah, they use stock footage sometimes to show to introduce the Korean War flashbacks, and I just kind of always love stock footage in movies. Like I think it's fascinating to see something that's clearly taken from a different source, like in this case probably like a war documentary or like a newsreel or something.
Yes, I always like that too. Yeah, because I like that kind of stock footage. When they recycle footage from another film to just beef up the runtime, I'm not really a fan of that choice. As you know, that just seems like a lazy choice for me.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing this up to tie into the War of the Colossal Beast. If you get a chance to see it, it's also available on YouTube. It is it's a fascinating film. I think it's more action packed than the predecessor, but it fills like 20 minutes of its 80-minute runtime with stock footage from the amazing Colossal Man.
Yeah, that's not great. I'm not a huge fan of that sort of thing either. It's like interesting in a way that there was such a like almost incestuous relationship, to use that, like a weird usage of that word, but it's interesting, but it does seem a little bit lazy.
Yeah. So I don't know, if you want to watch War of the Colossal Beast, just get ready to basically rewatch The Amazing Colossal Man.
I mean, it's not it's not the worst thing in the world to rewatch. So
No.
I would gladly do so. But yeah, I mean, like, some original footage probably would have been better. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's worth it. Okay. What do you think? What else?
Let's see here. I mean, like, there's a lot of charming stuff in this movie, I think. Even like the sci-fi explanation of like, oh, his cells are regenerating from the plutonium blast and like his heart is not keeping up with it. Again, it's pretty ridiculous, but it is at least more than Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, where she just sort of like encounters this alien blob and suddenly she starts growing. Like, at least there is like somewhat of an attempt to like show the sort of like scientific context for what's going on here.
I love that too. And I had this in the campy, but or maybe I had in the bad. I don't know, but it is charming. I love / hate how I call it science mumbo jumbo. How much of that is in this film? They're explaining, and I get it. The scientists are explaining to Carol the anatomy and the chemistry of Glenn's growth. They're doing that to inform the audience of Glenn's growth, but it comes off as just really talking down to this woman. Like, do you know what a heart is? It's a single-celled organism. And she's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. Yeah.
And the science sounds completely made up.
Good points. Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I find charming about it in a way. Not necessarily like the mansplaining aspect
No,
of
but
it,
it
just
is
like,
charming. I agree with you there.
yeah. And yeah, at least I mean, like, and it's so ridiculous in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and then like, when we see the alien and he's just like, he's like a large bald man like wearing a biker jacket, like he's supposed to be an alien, like,
Yeah.
I know I'm getting off topic a little bit here, but like it's so like they don't even try to explain what's going on there,
Nope, not at all.
and I guess that's okay.
It's we're laughing about it.
Yeah, true, exactly. There's other stuff that I liked, but I think we can move on to the bad, because there is certainly some bad stuff about this movie also.
Yeah. Well, you could take it away.
Well, I mean, like, it just, the dialogue is like so stilted, the performance is so wooden a lot of the time. It's hard to take it seriously. And I'm thinking of scenes where like the army specialist, they first kind of question him when Glenn first is exposed to the bomb, and they're like, he's miraculously healed, like all of his burns are like gone. What happened? And the army specialist is like, well, clearly it wasn't the plutonium blast. What are you talking about? And then they watch like 2 minutes of footage, which is like basically the beginning of this movie. They see the same thing that we did. And then suddenly the army specialist is like, yes, you're right. Like something unexplainable is going on here. And it's like, what happened here, man? Like that of course is ridiculous. Obviously that's part of the campy aspect of it too. But I mean, like the fact that you can't really take a lot of these characters and their interaction seriously works against the thematic complexity of the movie.
Right. And that's the give and take with a movie like this, where you accept warts and all while also lamenting the fact that those warts do take away from maybe what could be a really deeply felt film. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But and it is what it is, I guess.
Indeed. Yeah, you take the good with the bad. Yeah. The good with the bad with the campy.
Yeah. Something that and I thought this too with 50-Foot Woman, the scale of the height of the growth versus the material around him seemed inconsistent. Like they say he's 60 feet tall, but I guess I don't really understand or have an idea of what 60 feet looks like in real life. Because sometimes he's like a real giant touching the sky, and then sometimes he's fitting under a tent,
right?
A big circus tent. So I was like, I don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. And I love the fact that they try to explain the fact that he wears his like underwear throughout the entire thing, the sarong, I guess they call it. Like they even try to explain that a little bit. And he's like, look, I have this adjustable sarong, so I don't have to change clothes. It's like, I don't think it would really work that way. You get another case where they maybe explain a little bit too much, possibly.
Yes, I did with the script. For me, it ties in a little bit with that science talk, but there was a lot of talking when I would rather have just seen some monster action. Instead, there was a lot of explaining. Glenn, he's headed to Las Vegas. He's rampaging through the desert. But I'm like, cool, but why can't we just see that happen?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what we've come for. And I'm sure like that would be like the most sort of like time and labor intensive part of the production of the movie. So
absolutely.
They probably weren't really able to like to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, you're right. It's disappointing when, we want to see it, not hear about it.
Yeah. Speaking of Glenn Manning, this is a legitimate critique on my part in terms of just the writing and the characterization. I understand that he is going through a very traumatic experience, and the movie really leans heavily into his depression about his condition, which is great. But all Glenn Manning's character really is him just kind of lamenting and bemoaning his condition, which as an audience member and as an artistic creator, that to me is a less interesting choice than him actively seeking a way through his condition. Like how can I, Glenn Manning, fight to better my position? There was no fight in him. There was no urgent, like you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think like in addition to that, there would be an element of like power and excitement, I think, and like suddenly becoming like 30 or 60 or whatever feet tall, like
Yeah.
it might have been interesting to like convey some of that along with his just like utter despair, it's kind of all we get in this movie.
That's a great point, man. Like if you're directing this, it's like Glenn, the actor who's playing Glenn, the man, the colossal man, like you're a 60-foot giant. There's got to be some sense of excitement as well as fear and depression. So good point there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And again, like not to compare it to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman too much, but there is an element towards the end of that movie where she like finally has the power that she hasn't had through most of the movie, and there's like an element of like revenge. I don't think it works all that well, but there's an element of revenge against her Weasley husband. So at least in that case, she does kind of take advantage of her like sudden growth a little bit, and I don't think Glenn ever really does that in this movie.
No, very one note, and
Indeed,
it was not as interesting as it could have been.
Yeah, totally.
Anything
else any other bad stuff? Anything else that you disliked about it?
There was a weird love triangle thing, maybe like one of the army captains or whatever. He's like clearly romantically interested in Carol, but that never went anywhere. I was like, interesting, untapped potential there. There's a really funny, weird scene where Glenn is rampaging through Las Vegas and he peers through a window and there's a woman bathing, and it's a very like ooh la la scene, but it was very cringe, I thought, as well.
Yeah, it does not age well for sure. I'm glad you brought that up because like it is, it's a like it is cringe, absolutely, but also it's like sort of like one of the most like exploitative in like the terms of like a sort of sleazy exploitation picture or whatever, and at least it is like a moment of excitement, I guess. Like it's certainly memorable. It's like in bad taste for sure, but it's like if you watch some of these old movies for like the sort of like sleaze of it all, that's maybe the best example of that in the movie.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it was just like, whoa, that's all right, Glenn. Why don't you stop?
Settle down there.
Yeah, settle down, man. Also, like he's just wearing a diaper, essentially. I don't know if that's enough to conceal any arousal he may have.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm glad the movie didn't go there. It probably was not able to do so in 1957, which is a good thing.
He would have an enormous Schwunstiger.
As Terry Garr, right?
Yeah.
In Young Frankenstein. Yeah. Nice.
I was also slightly confused that he was suddenly inarticulate. I didn't catch that that would be a symptom of his growth, that he would sort of lose his mental faculties.
Right. That's like, I wish they would have explained that a little bit more, especially in the sense of like why exactly is he becoming mentally unhinged? Is it like the sort of PTSD that you were talking about, those sort of issues, or is it sort of like more of a physiological thing? It never explains that at all.
Nope. And it just came off as like, oh, we need a giant monster now, and giant monsters don't speak, right? That's the convention.
Yeah.
Like, he could speak. He doesn't have to be an animal.
It might be more interesting if he did. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So nothing we spoke about was campy at all. Because we clearly saved it all for our final category here. Giant diaper. Very campy.
Indeed. Yeah. It does not get much more campy than that. But really, like, the whole movie is like the epitome of camp, like pretty much every shot, every scene could be, the whole thing is in the campy category pretty much.
Yeah. He loses all of his hair. He's bald. So it just adds to this man baby look. I found it. What did you notice in when he was in Las Vegas, kind of walking amongst the buildings? Did it strike you exactly what he was doing with the buildings?
I feel it sort of seemed like he was trying to accessorize for a while, you know, like he went to like department stores and clothing stores. He even like ripped a crown off of like the top of a building, like a
Yeah.
department store building that had that kind of aesthetic, you know, and like pondered wearing it for a moment and then put it back down.
And
It's
then
weird. It has like a weird sense of humor about itself for a little
and
while.
then he's looking at this giant high-heeled shoe.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. I didn't think about that. That's funny. Yeah. Um, very unexpected. Not what you would think that he would do when he goes on a rampage in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it was odd. I was like, okay, he's looking for clothes.
Which I guess makes sense if you're only wearing a sarong. Yeah. um,
What a,
there's so
yeah.
many dialogue scenes that are really campy, and we've already brought up a couple of them. But another one of my favorite ones is when Carol and Paul, one of the army guys, is in the helicopter when they're trying to track down the giant Glenn, and there's this dialogue sequence where Carol is like, "How'd you learn to fly a helicopter?" And Paul, who's like usually very stoic and gruff, is just like, "I just wanted to learn to fly, and I did." And that's the end of that conversation. And it's like, that's like, 10 seconds you could have easily cut out of this movie.
I remember laughing at that too. Like, oh, okay.
Good to know.
I guess anyone could learn to fly a helicopter.
Yeah, indeed. It just there are like so many moments like that where it's like, you didn't really need to add that, but I'm sort of glad that you did.
It was so good.
Yeah.
This is a movie like we watched this separately, but now that I'm laughing about it with you, like we got to watch this type of movie with a group of people. I feel like,
yeah, for sure. Maybe some more like AIP, American International movies. If we watch them in the future, we're gonna have to like do them together from now on.
Yeah, get a group together too, and
Yeah,
I don't know. I think the most famous, most well-known, gifable scene from this movie happens at the end with that giant syringe.
Amazing.
Holy crap.
The best part of the movie for sure. And it's
Oh my
like
God.
my jaw was on the floor at that moment. Really incredible.
One of the most incredible scenes in any movie I've ever seen, honestly.
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted.
Right. And like the level of creativity in something like this where, like where else are you going to see somebody impaled with a giant syringe? I mean, the movie's worth watching if only for that reason,
Yeah, and for people listening, Glenn removes the giant hypodermic needle syringe out of his foot. He holds it up, he looks at it, and then like a javelin, throws it down into one of the scientists, and the camera cuts to this giant prop syringe falling into the scientist, and it's clearly like the needle is just on the other side of his body, but he falls, and you just have to watch it to believe it.
It's totally unexpected, even though I guess we should be expecting that to happen, but it works so well. It's great.
But I didn't, right? Because like the film never took such a action, had such action in it before.
Yeah.
And like true horror. But when that happened, I was like, oh, what the heck just happened?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminded me of the end of a movie called Terror in a Texas Town, which is really, really great. And it's not a camp kaiju or like monster movie or anything like that, but Sterling Hayden is in it. It's directed by Joseph H. Lewis, and there's like an impaling at the end of that movie that must be seen to be believed. That's all I'll say.
Okay, love a good impaling.
Yeah. No, but yeah, that's simultaneously probably the best and most campy moment in this movie.
Seriously, nothing tops that, and I think that's a good place to end this discussion.
Yeah. Indeed. Where else can we go from there?
So your verdicts. So we got, is it a timeless classic? Does it definitely stand the test of time? Is it really great overall, but has some antiquated moments, but ultimately stands the test of time? Or is it just, just for fun, maybe historically significant, but ultimately, doesn't stand the test of time? Or is it not worth revisiting at all? Trash, garbage film, does not stand the test of time. What do you think?
I'm on the fence on this one. I'm gonna have to say that it is very fun, but it does not stand the test of time. Some things don't age very well, like we talked about before, the bathing woman scene. Certainly it is very campy and ridiculous and hard to take seriously some of the time. All those things being said, I mean, it's worth watching. It's such a fascinating like time capsule in many different ways, but I think I'll have to go with that verdict.
Yeah. What were you on the fence with? What else? Where could you have gone?
Well, for me, it's right in between that and, it is great and it does stand the test of time because in a way, like this is why we watch the old campy, like giant beast movies or like giant human movies, like for this kind of like campy, outdated ridiculousness, So I want to give it a higher rating, but ultimately I have to say it does not quite stand the test of time.
Yeah, I'm in full accord with you there. I think it has a lot of great moments. We've laughed a lot, but lest we forget that a majority of this film, there's not a lot of action. The dialogue is wooden and the acting is fine,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So as a complete film, it does not stand the test of time.
Right. As much as I want to elevate it and give it the higher rating, you can never really be objective, but I do have to say that it does not not totally stand the test of time.
But boy, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's what we love about it.
Yeah. Oh, good chat. What are we talking about next time?
Next time we are going to talk about Piranha 2 by James Cameron.
I've never seen it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I've never seen it either, to be honest. I know, or I believe in a previous Camp Kaiju segments, you talked about the original Piranha by Joe Dante.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and Dante was another protege of Roger Corman.
Indeed, to connect it all together.
Yep.
So I'm really excited to watch the sequel Piranha 2 and talk about that. One of the auspicious early movies by a director that's gone on to become one of the biggest blockbuster directors in American movies since then. So
yeah, and how neat that he started his career making monster movies.
Yeah, like as we said before, like so many of them do. It'll be a good conversation.
Cool. Piranha 2, everybody, here on Camp Kaiju. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow us wherever you podcast. On Instagram, there is a TikTok, believe it or not. I like to make funny videos sometimes. And so on TikTok and Instagram, I will be posting the clip of the syringe impaling from The Amazing Colossal Man. So follow for that kind of content. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Camp Kaiju.
Bye. Thank you.
See you, Matt.
See ya.